up, everybody? This is another episode of Whiskey with an Agent. This one, let me turn that down a little bit. This one, and you're always laughing in the beginning here. You always, I don't know. Episode 14, is that funny? Is it funny what I'm doing? Should I do it differently? What's going on? I should? What should I do different? What should I do different?
Maybe as you're talking, turn down the music a little bit.
What if I really like? What if I really like the music? Here, let's do it again. Okay, we're just coming off of the intro. What's up, everybody? Hey, how's that? Is that better fade in?
A little better.
One of these days, man.
This is
One
why
of
I
these
drink.
days.
You.
Because of me. Because of me. All right. Well, you know what? Just for that, no music for you. The music is off. It is done.
Off. It's dim.
No more. No
I'm
more.
so sorry, everyone.
Well, if you want to let Chris know what you think about him cutting out the mute, then get in touch with him.
Yes, please let me know. Actually, put it in the comments. Put it in the comments so we can have a debate.
Right.
What's up, buddy?
Geez. Not much, man. You're working hard today, huh?
Yes, I ended up being late because I've been working hard, driving around, clients, showings, offers, new listing coming live tomorrow, which is awesome.
Oh, nice.
And
very cool.
And thank you. And on top of that, I needed to stop and get a new bourbon.
Oh.
So what I have here is the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. So how to get this one, because a couple of weeks ago, me and my buddy Alex, we visited our friend over on the coast at Matt, and he had bought a bottle of the Double Oaked, and the three of us absolutely destroyed that bottle in a very, very quick time. So I needed to get it again. It's been on my hit list.
Yep.
So that is what I'm drinking tonight, my friend. What about you?
Nice.
What are you drinking?
I went back to the one of my Japanese, I couldn't think of it, Japanese whiskeys, the Fuji Sanruku. So I do have the Whistle Pig still sitting here. Actually, it's sitting here from 2 weeks ago, and I've been eyeballing it. As every time I come sit down on my desk, I'm like, huh. And my glass has been sitting since the last show. It's been sitting here too, and I caught myself one time. I sat down. I was like, well, heck, there's a glass. There's a whiskey. Might as well just have a little sip when I'm doing some work. So,
just a little.
But yeah, this time I'm drinking the Fuji Sanruku straight from Japan.
I would love to try some of that one day.
I thought you did when we did our.
Not that one.
No, it's good.
No.
It's nice and smooth.
You brought over the Saxon. And then the other one, the green.
The other one, yeah. I can't remember what it's called. I still have some.
You got.
Yeah, I'm trying not to I'm trying to make those ones last because it might be a while before I go back to Japan.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a couple that I'm I'll wait.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
But
so
cheers, buddy.
Cheers, bro.
Yeah. What the heck? You got rats running around your house or what?
I got dogs. They're happy I'm home, so they're running around. Usually I have my door closed, but the missus is out doing some painting and wine night tonight. So I'm stuck with the kids.
All right.
A couple of fur babies, and right now the male is going back and forth right now, and his feet are dirty, so it's just gonna be like, oh my lord, we have white bed sheets too.
Oh yeah, you know what? After a while, I mean, I've got 3 small dogs, and they sleep in the bed with us, and they'll wake up in the middle of the night, they go out, and then they come back, and I'm just like half asleep. I don't want to clean their feet off. Right back in the bed. There's nothing you can't. I mean.
No,
the first few times I'm like, oh, I can't do it. But now I literally might as well sleep in the dirt because there's so much sand.
Nope, can't do that.
No.
So I'll have to, can't do that. So I'll strip those sheets, clean the floor. when this is done. Anyways,
Anywho.
tonight, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, is a very boring but important topic.
Yes.
And we're going to be discussing the most updated as is contract. There are two types of contracts, but we're going to focus on the as is because it is the most prevalent and widely used contract in the state of Florida and possibly in the US as of right now.
Yep. Yeah, and there's some minor differences. The main thing is just whether or not the seller is required to do repairs or not. Where, so the as is contract, the seller is not required, whereas the other one, the FAR bar, is the seller is required. They're obligated to do certain repairs, not all repairs, and it maxes out at a certain amount and everything. But we're not going to focus, like Chris said, we're not going to focus on that one as much, just because most everybody is using the as is contract. So, but there's a lot of similarities though.
Yes.
As far as the rest of the contract, it's just that what I just said was pretty much that's like the main difference.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty much pretty much like you said, like just the repairs, if they're gonna pay for them or not, if you can agree to them up ahead of time, and we'll get you that. We'll actually get to the meat and potatoes of the as is tonight. As I tug of war with my dog.
If anybody wants a copy of the as is contract, I have one available. So if you email us, we have a new email now. You can email us at show@whiskeywithanagent.com, and it comes straight to my phone. So I'll never miss an email. I can't guarantee I'll get back to every email, but I will certainly try. But yeah, if you want a copy of that contract, email show@whiskeywithanagent.com. I tell you what, I'm going to put it in the chat.
Put it
comments.
in the chat, sir. Put it in the chat.
Whiskeywithanagent.com. Boom. There it is. So email it. That went out to each platform that we're on. So we're actually on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. For those of you who like Twitch.
No one likes Twitch. Just kidding.
No one likes Twitch. I don't know.
That's not true. Millions of people love Twitch.
That is
true. All right. So, what are the first things we're going to talk about? Are we going to go from top down?
Yeah, we might as well. You want me to share my screen and there it is. All right. So this is the beginning of the contract. It's labeled as is residential contract for sale and purchase. So somebody's selling a house and somebody is buying a house. Why did it do? There we go. So that's why it's for sale and purchase, because it's for both parties. So, I mean, we can just take it from the top here. Most of the stuff is pretty straightforward. Obviously here, this is the parties that are involved. So the seller and the buyer. Today I'm the seller and Chris is the buyer. So I know
I'm the one buying his podcast.
But look at this house. Look at this badass house that you're buying. It's on 123 Whiskey Street in Podcast, Florida. You like that?
I do like that. And it's located in Podcast County.
Yes, it's awesome. So it's Podcast, Florida, located in Podcast County. Yeah. And then what?
Where'd you come up with that tax ID number? 3315 330101.
That's an actual tax ID. I got lazy and copied one
that's
from
hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay.
So
everyone, I'm sorry, Jared. So everyone, pretty much the property description, we all know a physical tangible address, but there are different ways that a particular property is identified. We have our tangible address, you have the tax ID number, and then you have the legal description. The legal description usually doesn't make any sense to a majority of people, but that's how it was back in the day. If you read it there, it's like south 70 feet of lot 10, block 1, Meldeline Park, MB 26, page 63 per or. So they used to do that back in the day. And then sometimes they would even put like 50 feet from tree on southwest corner, like from a tree. It's like, so that's how
Right.
it was identified back in the day. Now legal descriptions have gotten a lot easier because
Yep.
all of our roads are essentially either north or south. It's only when you get into like the cities like in Philadelphia and Boston and stuff like that where you get city like roads to go in all kinds of directions. And that's
Yep.
where things get really wonky. But by and
Yep.
large, roads are north, south, east, or west, and they do like almost perfect squares amongst it. So, but every now and then you get a legal description like that. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, and the legal description is not something necessarily that you have to worry about. You just need to make sure that it's in there.
Correct.
It has to be in there. Your agent will put that in there. You don't, I mean, you can verify through the county website that it's the correct one if you want, but just make sure it's there. It's a requirement.
You definitely want to make sure it's correct though, because I have
Well,
a
yeah.
client that's dealing with a legal description issue. So like over
Oh,
the
really?
course of years,
Yeah.
the boundary has shifted, and now it's like a foot over their pool deck. And
Oh.
because the appraisers and the people writing the legal description messed up, and
Oh.
so now the property next door owns a portion of their pool deck, and therefore we can't sell the house because of this legal description boundary issue. And it is a
Man.
cluster F. It's a
Yeah.
cluster F, like
Dang.
hardcore. Been
Oh,
dealing with it
wow.
for nearly a year now. No one wants to touch
Jeez.
it.
Yeah.
No one can give us an easy solution. So
Man.
it's important to make sure that the legal description is correct. Everything when it comes to contracts needs to be
Right.
correct first and
Yes.
foremost. All right,
Yep.
bring that sucker back up.
Let's bring it back up.
Mm-hmm.
So, still talking about so that's the property description, A, B, and C, and then D, that section here, section D. Oh, we just there was a comment that came in that made us laugh.
From Greg, our lender,
Yeah,
or my
our
buddy, my mortgage guy, Greg, of the
Yep.
mortgage firm. Shout out to the mortgage firm, Greg Meyer.
Yeah. What?
What? So yeah, cluster. Okay,
Yeah.
so go on to the next personal property.
So personal property, this is where you're going to list. It's important to read through a lot of these things so you fully understand, and that's kind of why we're going through it, not to read word for word, to give you an idea of what is in here and some of the legalities of things that you have to really pay attention to and make sure that you're looking at and that your agent fills it out correctly, or it's so it's not the first time that you're seeing it when you're going to get going to sell your house or buy a house.
It's definitely to give you proper expectation, and then also to make sure that you're aware of some of the gray area.
That is true. Yep.
Okay.
So personal property. So basically what this one is, this one will be easy enough just to read through it real quick. Unless excluded by paragraph 1E, which is down below. So 1E is the following items are excluded from the purchase. So unless excluded in paragraph 1E or by other terms of this contract, which is something that we would look at later, the following items which are owned by the seller and existing on the property as of the date of the initial offer are included in the purchase. Now, these things are going to include ranges, ovens, refrigerators, dishwashers, disposals, ceiling fans, light fixtures, drapery rods, and draperies, blinds, windows, treatments, smoke detectors, garage door openers. There's a whole list of things, even going down to television wall mounts and television mounting hardware. So that's kind of been that's a new one. So before, I mean, your TV, it just sat on like an entertainment center, and it wasn't mounted to anything. So as soon as you mount something, it becomes what's called a fixture. So in a fixture, like a fan or something like that, stays with the house. So there was some discrepancy before about whether or not, because TVs had really never been an issue until they began mounting them. And some of these mounts are very heavy duty, and they're like, locked into the wall, to the studs.
Yep.
And so have you had issues with that?
Luckily, no, or at least not yet.
Yeah,
Because when you remove these TV wall mounts, they do significant damage to the
they
drywall.
do. Yeah,
Or because like if you can make it really pretty, but if you have cable wire coming through the wall that you've fed through, and like for anything else of an entertainment system, when you remove all that stuff, you have stud holes. You have a giant hole where the any of the cable lines or anything like that, the power all
yeah.
goes. It is a mess, and especially if, which is really common, is if say like this photo right here was the wall mount of a TV. I've seen it
Right.
where they'll paint all around the TV. And so
Yep.
when they remove it, there's a completely different color back here because
Yep.
they were too
Yep.
lazy to remove it,
Yep.
to do it properly. So
Yes.
it's a big pain in the butt, and it has to be done like correctly. And that's where a lot of issues, because like buyers will come into the house and being like, what the hell is this hole doing in my house? Like
Right.
my wall, like
Right.
what the hell? So
That
like
wasn't
what?
there before.
So there's been exactly. So there's been so many back and forth and legalities, so they had to put it into the contract because it is technically a fixture. And if you read
Right.
in the certain sections, like all fixtures, including furniture that is fixed, has to convey with the property. Now there's one
Right.
thing that they removed that you had added in that contract. Can you pull it back up?
Yeah, I can. I can do that. There it
And
is.
it's, if you look at there on line 21 that starred, um, oh, you didn't put it in there. So, but the one thing that used to be in here in that description for personal property of Section D was a microwave. A microwave
Yes.
used to be considered automatically conveyed with the property. It's no longer in there. And the
Right.
reason for that is because not all microwaves are fixed or above the
Correct.
stove or in a
Correct.
section. Like some microwaves are left on a counter. So at that
Correct.
point, it's like, is this considered a fixed or is this considered a personal property? And
Right.
so a lot of discrepancies again came on that. So when you are placing an offer and if you see a microwave, whether it's fixed or not, if you want that microwave, you're going to have to put that microwave, and
Right.
you'll be entitled if the seller agrees to that.
Correct.
Because last thing, I mean, I've had this happen before where a buyer goes into, after signing everything, they go into the house, all the appliances are gone. The refrigerator's gone. There was never a dishwasher,
Jeez.
but the stove is gone. The microwave is gone.
Oh
And
my
she called
goodness.
me like panicking. She's like, Chris, what the hell? Like all this stuff is gone. And I was just like, oh my Lord. So I contacted the listing agent, and he goes, yeah, that was never part of the contract. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And
It's
he's like, yeah, it was
standard.
never. He's like, it wasn't on the MLS. I'm like, what do you mean it wasn't on the MLS? It was on the contract. He goes,
No.
MLS. This guy was an idiot. He straight up
It
said like
sounds.
it wasn't there. If it wasn't on the MLS, then it doesn't convey. I'm just like, that makes no freaking sense. Page 1 of the contract says all these items convey. I
Right.
screenshotted it, sent it to him. Choice words were said, and ultimately he had to fork his commission because the sellers were
Ooh.
absolutely not giving back those, and
Yikes.
they were stainless steel. He had to fork over $4,000
Yeah.
for appliances. And
For
so
appliances.
like, if whether
Could you
you're
imagine
selling
if
or
they
you're
were?
buying,
Could you imagine if they were like high end appliances?
yeah. Well, anything at $4,000 worth of appliances is considered high end for most people.
Well, but I'm saying like I'm just if they had like even if they have a decent house, but then they wanted some high end. I can't think of some of the brand name. What is it, Wolf or something like that? If
There's
they
all
had some,
kinds, yeah,
yeah,
some
but if
really
they had
high
some
end stuff,
high
yeah.
end stuff, I mean, man, that gets really expensive for
Yeah. I
for
mean,
that kind of
even now,
mistake.
like you can spend really, really good money for LG,
Yeah,
Samsung, Whirlpool's, KitchenAid, Frigidaire, all
yeah,
those. They got their high end stuff. Like
they do, they
Bethany
do.
and I, we just bought a brand new top of the line 2020 fridge, 2021 microwave, 2121
Hmm.
range, and we just for those 3 items, it was over $6,000.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, that sounds about right. When we built our house, we bought all we had to get all new appliances, and I did it through GE, and they had some pretty good sales going on. So it was like a Black Friday sale or something, and it really wasn't that bad. It was pretty good, but that was a few
yeah.
years ago though. So
Yep.
I imagine they've gotten a little bit more expensive now with supply chain
Mhm.
shortage
Yeah.
and all that.
Well,
But
for new construction, majority of the suppliers are now becoming like Samsung, because it's made
Yeah.
here. It's made here. They make their own microchips too here in-house. In-house, I mean by United States.
Right. Right.
So it's really
Right.
important because you had a couple other things like a frozen, a freezer, a dish, washer, and dryer do not convey. Those are considered personal items. Toaster oven,
Correct.
nah.
Yeah. Well, I was
Furniture,
just throwing
yeah,
some
throwing some
examples in
stuff.
there. So, yeah, washer and dryer. So if you go back and you read that paragraph D, it doesn't say anything about a washer and dryer, and that's a
Yep.
common mistake that buyers will make. They'll see the washer and dryer in the laundry room, and they're like, "Okay, cool," and they're thinking that it comes with it. But if you don't specify,
Mm-hmm.
other personal property items included in this purchase are washer
Yeah.
and dryer. If you don't include it here, then don't.
Yeah.
If it's not there, then that's
Here's where the mistake is made. The question from a buyer is, do all appliances stay?
right.
A washer and dryer is part of an appliance. So when an agent is quick to say yes, the
Correct.
buyers could be including that washer and dryer. They
It
could
could
be
be.
now including that microwave.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if they're not in the contract and those sellers take it, that buyer's agent might be left to fork up some money for those appliances.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's really important to understand. This is what we mean by the gray area of things. Like it's really
Right.
important to know.
Right.
Dryer or
And
an extra freezer, something like that, or an extra
yep.
refrigerator in the garage. Got to make sure
Yep.
that's in there.
Yep. Yeah. So if it's an extra refrigerator, then yeah, it's got to be put in there. There's one refrigerator that's it's noted in section D here, but yeah, that's just the main one in the kitchen. If there's extra ones, freezer stuff, then you'd have to add that. And note on the left-hand side, so when you're going through these contracts, anything with a star next to the line, so they put these line numbers, let me back up. They put these line numbers so it's a lot easier to reference specific areas of the contract. So you're not just saying, okay, then can we look at section 1D? Okay, well, what part of section 1D? Specifically, I want to look at line 17, where it talks about dishwashers.
Yep.
Okay, so you have these line numbers, and then you have some of the line numbers have asterisks. The ones that have asterisks, those are all the spots that require some sort of input, or it doesn't not necessarily requires input, but there's an option to add something there.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make some sort of selection.
Agreed.
So
anything that's excluded is really important as well, because I've seen people
correct.
battle over things that were supposed to be excluded.
Yep.
So it's really important to make sure there's clarity between the buyer and the seller of what conveys and what's being excluded.
Right.
So
for example, sometimes an outbuilding, I've seen sometimes where it's like a small shed. A seller may want to take that shed with them. So that would be something that you would have to put in there that's excluded from the purchase.
Yep. And that's a true statement too, because when we bought this house, they were talking about taking the shed, and I was just like,
Right.
the shed stays, bro. Like that was not part of the exclusion of the
Right.
property.
Right.
So ultimately they left it because they knew I was right. They messed up.
Of course. Of course.
So let's see here. The purchase price. This is where we start getting to the numbers.
Yeah. So
as you can see, his podcast is worth $500,000.
So this house on Podcast County is selling. We've agreed. Chris and I agreed. Chris, I got him to agree to $500,000. So that's going to be the purchase price, and then going on down. So the initial deposit. So the initial deposit typically, I like to see, depending on the house and whatever, but usually you want to be at least 1% or a minimum of, about $1,500, depending, if that 1% doesn't get you to $1,500, which most the way home prices are, it usually does now. But at least 1%, you can go higher to be a little bit more aggressive. Mm-hmm. What do you typically tell your buyers, Chris?
In this market, depending on their price point and location, minimum 1%, just like you, as the standard. But if you're trying to convey seriousness and you're trying to win bids, you have to go a little more aggressive. You have to show you have more skin in the game that you're willing to lose, just because that's the reality of it.
Right.
Because you could lose that deposit. I only recommend doing what you're comfortable with. The idea is not
Yes.
to make you house broke or poor or put you in a compromising situation, because 30 days is a long time. 35
Yes.
days or 45 days, whatever the length of contract is, it's a long time. So
Yes.
if you're shelling out more money than you're financially comfortable with and something happens,
Yep.
like that's gonna make me feel bad, right?
Right.
So, and
Yep.
ultimately, that money does not go to the seller. That money goes to a third party, whether it be a
Correct.
title company, which is common
Mm-hmm.
here in Florida, or it could be
Mm-hmm.
a lawyer, which is common in the northern states.
Correct.
And they hold it. They're a third party. They don't answer to the seller. They don't answer to you. And the only way you get that money back is if both parties agree to the release of the escrow deposit and the
Mm-hmm.
determination of who or how it's split between the two parties. And
Right.
sometimes agents get a portion of that deposit too. You just got to make sure how that listing agreement or how your agreements between your clients or your realtors are or agents
Correct.
are is set
Yep.
up. So it's very important to know that.
Yep.
So the money ultimately, so say if you put 5,000 here in escrow, then ultimately, like, and when the deal closes, that is applied towards your down payment and your prepaids. So you actually
Correct.
come to the table with a little bit less money. Okay. So
Right.
you can do one deposit, you can do two deposits, however you want to structure it. So say if you are willing to do, say, 10 grand deposit, you can, if you want to pull up the contract here, are excellent. Because if you look at the additional project on line 36B, additional
Yes.
deposits to be delivered in escrow within blank days. So one thing that I do strategically, so instead of like throwing all the skin, the whole deposit into in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
essentially do half now or
Yep.
a small amount. And then what you do is say after the inspection period, right now the common inspection period is 7 days. On day 8, you'll make a second deposit totaling $10,000 that you see right there. So
Correct.
essentially, it shows that, you know what, seller, the inspections went well. I am willing to do a second deposit to show my seriousness. I have more skin in the game. I am even
Right.
more committed by offering
Yep.
up $10,000 worth of deposit.
Yep.
And then that's how you slice it. That's how you can slice it. You can do
Right.
10,000 all up front if you want to. I've
Yeah.
seen $70,000 escrow deposits, whatever you're comfortable with, but never do
Yeah.
more than what you're not.
It's whatever you want to put in there, and what it, ultimately you're just trying to show the seller that, hey, I really want this house. I'm willing to make it work, and here's a large amount of money to be put into escrow that says I'm ready to buy this
I'm
house. Now,
serious.
with that said, just because you put it into escrow doesn't mean if something goes wrong with the house or the deal or the inspection or something, there's certain caveats depending on what's going on that you'll get 100% of that escrow deposit back as long as you meet. And we'll talk about during the inspection period and other reasons
Defaults.
as we go through the contract of when you would get your escrow back. But I just want to make that clear that just because you put the $5,000 in there initially, that doesn't mean it's gone. If the contract falls through, it doesn't mean it's gone. There are chances for you to get that money back, and 100% of it to come back to the buyer side. So,
Go to the next section.
So we're at line 39 now. So, which this talks about if you're doing financing, and for this particular offer, Chris is doing, he's going to finance 80%. So there's a couple of different ways you can put it into here. For me, I like to put, the percentage amount because it lets the seller know what the act, they don't have to really do all the math, or if they're going to do a counter offer, they can, it's just less to strike out. But for this particular case, Chris is going to finance 80% of the $500,000, which going down to line E or section E, line 41 or line 42. So the remainder for him is going to be $90,000. So he's financing, what is that, $410,000, right?
Correct.
So
It's really important to read that line, balance to
Yes.
close, and then as
Yep.
parentheses, not including buyer's closing costs, prepaids, or prorations. Okay.
Correct.
So that's just the down payment.
Correct.
Okay.
So in
Down
this case,
payment. Down payment.
20%. It's a
Mhm.
20% down payment.
Yeah.
Now, and then just as that says, your buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and prorations. So you still have closing costs through the title company. You have, certain fees that are associated, survey fees, all that kind of stuff, loan origination fees, prepaids, and your prorations. So like your county taxes or HOA, those are all going to be prorated in
Factored
order,
into it.
between you and the seller, depending on what time of the year you're buying the house and so on. But this is just a down payment, just like what Chris said.
And to give an idea for closing costs, it's going to be anywhere between 2% and 4.5%. It's a big difference, and 2% and 4.5% of that purchase price. Okay, so that's kind of easy to kind of dictate. Like Jared had mentioned, if you're moving into an HOA with a high monthly and the taxes on top of that are high, you're going to be looking at closer to that 4% or 4.5%. But if you're moving out into the sticks, then essentially the taxes are going to be pretty low. And you're not going to have an HOA, so you're going to be closer to the 2%. So that's going to be your range to give you kind of a ballpark.
Right.
So not only are you going to need that $90,000 or $100,000, but you're also going to need additional, what's it, like 2% of that. So you're looking at anywhere between about 20 grand or so, 20 grand to 30 grand.
Yep.
Yeah. Closing costs. So you're looking at over about $130,000 for down payment and closing costs. Just to kind of give everyone a perspective. Let's go on to the next section here.
So going into the next section. So this is pretty straightforward. Time for acceptance and offer and counter offers. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Some people will give, as a buyer, you can give a seller. Essentially what this is, you're telling the seller, hey, I've sent you an offer. I would like a response by this date. You don't have to put a date in there. You could give them a week. You could give them a day. Typically, most buyer's agents they'll allow for at least one day, usually a business day, depending on what the deal is. But and then occasionally I won't even put a date in here, just depending on, and it's a case by case scenario depending on the buyer. The buyer may have time to wait, and we'll throw it in there. We're looking at other things, and if they don't get back to us in time and we find something else, we just write a letter and say, hey, we're rescinding our offer because we didn't have a date on there. So, and that's no big deal. But this is just, if you have a date in there, then if the only time I don't, or there's a reason, there's a certain reason why I don't like to have a date, is if the buyer really wants the house. So let's say tomorrow is April 8th. Let's say the sellers don't get back to me by tomorrow night. Do I still want this house? Yes. Yeah. So, but technically this contract is now void. My offer is no longer valid because it has expired. So that's why sometimes I don't put a date in there. So it depends on the situation. What do you usually do, Chris?
Well, the thing is, if you read it, automatically withdrawals after 2 days.
Right. Oh, is that something that's new? I can't.
Yeah.
Is that in the
pull
old?
It up.
Okay. What? No, I'm talking about was that in the old contract as well?
I can't remember, but see, the offer shall be deemed withdrawn, and the deposit, if any, shall be returned to buyer, unless otherwise stated. Time for acceptance of any counter offer shall be within 2 days.
Right.
So a counter offer
could
also be considered an acceptance. So like your offer will automatically be withdrawn after 2 days, to my understanding, unless someone can tell me otherwise. So therefore, like I always put a deadline of 2 days, and then I give a time. So if it's 2 days, I'm giving you a time frame of 12 o'clock in the afternoon. If
by
it's
the
like
second
if
day.
it's like
Yeah.
yeah. So if I was to submit an offer today and my
Yeah.
buyer wanted an acceptance like right away, well, I'm gonna
Hmm.
set the acceptance for tomorrow the 8th at 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. or
Right.
5 p.m. Or
Right.
like, hey, I still want to give you that 2 days, but I don't want to linger, so I'll wait 2 days, which would put me at the 9th at 5 o'clock. So there's more than enough time to review it. People have work, people have kids, so they need time to be able to sit down with
And
their
read.
spouse or sitting together and review it with their realtor. So I want to
Yep.
give that professional courtesy. If we decide to move
Correct.
on anytime for there, all I have to do is send an email. We have
Right.
rescinded our offer.
Yep.
That's simple. And
Yep.
ultimately, if it goes past, and then the seller comes like, "Hey, we would like to accept your offer." Okay, no problem.
Right.
I'll just do a quick revision.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
So once you also when you submit an offer, you also need to provide a closing date, and that's what this section here is. So
Yep.
the common in Florida close date is about 30 to 35 days. So you just put your closing date. Self-explanatory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You're leaving enough room to get your loan approved, to get all of your surveys and appraisals or whatever you have to get. So, but usually it's the loan period is what's going to take the longest to get everything
Yes.
approved by
The loaner.
the lender and the underwriters and everything. Get
That's
that
correct.
cleared to close, kind of thing. But ultimately, go ahead. Ultimately, you want to talk to your lender to figure out a good closing date, and then correspond that with, when do you want to close? You may have a lease that's coming up, or you may be selling a house, or whatever the case is. So you got to kind of coordinate. But the biggest thing is just get with your lender to find out, hey, I'm doing a conventional loan or I'm doing an FHA loan. How long is it going to take you to get everything approved? And they're going to pretty much, they're going to give you something that's pretty spot on. Hey, I can do it by May 31st. I can't do it before that, but I can hit May 31st. All right, cool. We're going to put May 31st.
Yeah.
So
it's super important to talk to the lender, because every lender, whether it be direct or a brokerage, or a portfolio lender, they all have their different turnaround times. And right now, a lot of it is contingent on the buyer themselves to get the documents in a timely manner, as well as the appraisal. The appraisal is taking the longest time right now, everyone. Okay. So it's like really important that you talk to the lender and be like, hey, what are the turn times right now? We're about 48 hours, like per day of something being submitted. So, okay. So you're probably looking at respectfully about 30 to 35 days to get it done.
right.
And the thing is, you don't want to rush the process, because rushing causes errors, and every human on this planet is full of
Yep.
errors. All right.
Correct.
That's part of being human, is that we are flawed.
That's right.
And the thing is, like, if you take 5 days to submit documents, don't be yelling at them when
Right.
you need an extension, because you
Correct.
created your own headache. Now,
Right.
there are some things that you can't help. Like if you require like a tax return or a transcript, and the only way to do it is to have it be mailed to you, that's understandable.
Correct.
Every situation is very deeply and unique. And the thing is,
Right.
it's important to be transparent with the opposite side. So a lot of this that we're talking about is from a buyer perspective.
Yep.
So if you're a buyer, and you need that extra time, your realtor and your lender need to get with the listing agent. Hey, listen, we are requesting this document. The turn times from the IRS or the student loan or whatever it is a week.
Right.
We need to act now and get that extension going, and
Yep.
have the seller, because the nicer you play in the sandbox with communication, the easier and smoother it's going to be. And
100%.
hopefully that seller is completely understanding of the case, because they bought that house, meaning
Right.
they've been through that same process.
Yep.
Unfortunately, some people didn't buy their house in like this past year or two. They bought their house 30 years ago.
Correct.
Much different time.
Yes.
Much different process. It was
Much,
wild,
much.
wild west back then.
Yeah.
Do you have a job? Yes. Do you breathe air? Yes. Oh, look, you're approved.
Oh,
there you go.
cool. You're approved. All right. Let's get
So
you 2 houses.
that's how it was. So I know we kind of deviated into the weeds. That's me. I do that. But it's really important to set proper expectations by like what Jared said and talk to the lender and what their turnaround times and
Yes.
what's a realistic close date. Okay. So
And moving forward too, these are all things that even after everybody agrees on a closing date and all these terms, all these things can come, you can come back and extend the closing date, as long as you have valid reasons and the sellers are good with it. You can extend, the closing date or change the terms after everything's been signed. It just has to be mutually agreed upon between all the parties that are signing this contract. So and I've had several times where, hey, we're not going to make this closing date because of whatever. And if it's a legit reason, then, most of the time the sellers are going to say, yeah, that's fine.
We'll give you a week,
because
2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll give you a week, or, or you, so there are options, or say, hey, we got everything done a lot quicker than we thought. We can close on, May 20th. We don't have to wait till May 31st. All right, cool. We can do that too. So all these things, just because it's written and you guys have already agreed on it, doesn't mean you can't go back and change it. So just keep that in mind as you're going through. Everything it's always negotiable at any time.
100%. Okay, so the next section in the contract that we're going to discuss is extension of the closing date. So there are two things that you can see here, section A on line 56 and 61 and line 61, section B, that automatically makes the contract extend. The first one is pretty much the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In the event that the loan or the lender is not able to fulfill the guidelines or have the funds necessary to complete the loan, they're going to the contract will automatically extend, but shall not exceed 7 days, as you can see there. So the separate section, and that if you want more details on that, we're not a lawyer. Like we can't really go too much into nuance of that section because it is quite complicated than what it seems. If it's can be explained more simply, then please, by all means. The second section is really easy. In the event of constituting force majeure, which is pretty much an act of God. If we are a hurricane state, okay? So this actually happened to me. A hurricane came through. Absolutely shut down everything because power was down. We couldn't close. And when the contract automatically extended. I can't remember what it is in the contract now, but at that time it automatically extends, I think, up to 30 days. And then ultimately we were able to go back online. But as we were about to close, this was a lender who was a VA. And so there was a statewide reappraisal issue in effect. Okay. So every home that has already been passed appraisal but hasn't closed needed to get reappraised for damage. So essentially, the contract had already extended because of the hurricane, because power was down for like a couple days, and then we needed to extend it again automatically because it was part of that force majeure that caused a ripple effect, saying that, hey, we need to get a reappraisal. And the seller was just like, no, like you're breaching the contract. He's like, listen, we don't need to have the only reason for this reappraisal is because of this hurricane. This hurricane is the only reason. So it's an act of God. No one could have helped that. So essentially we had to extend it about like 2.5 weeks, and the seller was pissed. So mad that we had to do that. It's just like, that's not our call. And he was claiming breach of contract every step of the way, but I was just like, yo, force majeure. And it's a ripple effect. Like you have
that's why it's so important to read and understand these contracts, even the parts that, we all tend to kind of glaze through a lot of the contracts, and especially if you're not having to fill out anything, we have the asterisk lines where we actually have to check a box or fill in a blank or something, but the rest of it, a lot of it is just kind of legal jargon and things, and so we a lot of times glaze over it, just thinking it's like, well, it's there for a reason, and I'll deal with it if I have to. It happens just like what Chris said, is that seller started calling breach of contract, and chances are he didn't read anything that he other than the purchase price, the escrow deposit, and maybe like a closing date, and maybe a couple other things. The rest of it, he just said, that's good, and then signed it. So he didn't really have an idea of, well, no, this is actually legit. We had an act of God, a hurricane that came through, and now we get to extend it, not because we want to, but because we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to, and the lender wasn't going to sign off on the loan because we didn't have the reappraisal. So it's just like, I'm sorry, seller, but we're all in this,
Correct. Yeah.
And man, yeah, he was not happy. But I was just like, that's why like it's so important to not so much as a seller look at the bottom line, but look at the terms.
Correct.
How are these terms going to affect you? How can this hurt you? How could this, help you? So it's so important to know the terms just as much as your bottom line. If all you're staring at is like money and you're playing Mr. Krabs, money,
right.
You're greedy and you're setting yourself up for a massive failure. And the only person you're going to yell at is everyone but yourself because you decided not to read or listen to your realtor who's trying to explain what the stuff is.
Right.
Or what the terms are.
Yep.
Okay. So the next section 6, is actually really easy. It's occupancy and possession. Like ultimately, like the intention is to occupy the property. You check the box if property is subject to being leased after occupancy. Typically, I would imagine only an investor would check that box. Other than that, like that's not checked. That one's kind of like left blank. So it's just kind of read at your leisure. Section 7. Do you have anything to really say about that? Because I don't like that. Doesn't it's so irrelevant for the majority of the people that I work with.
For most of the people, but it's still important to understand what it means because, and every once in a while, I'll see. Sometimes I'll see the second box where they may assign but not be released from liability.
I was talking about section 6, not 7. Section 7.
Okay. Okay. I was. Occupancy and possession. It's that's a case by case. If it's going to apply, then have your realtor go over this section carefully to make sure you understand it because it's dealing with what it says here.
Occupancy.
Check if property is subject to lease or occupancy after closing. So
which is it's just kind of common nowadays, but no one puts that. And the reason for that is because lenders and underwriters don't like to know that you're not occupying the property
right away.
Right away, because if that was the case, then that is an investment.
Correct.
So therefore, the whole terms of the loan changes drastically. So a lot of that is just left on blank. Everyone intends on occupying for the most part, and if you're an investor, this still doesn't necessarily apply. Actually, it would apply, but you're most likely paying cash as an investor.
Correct.
Let's just say that. Or it's a portfolio lender. They don't necessarily care. But Section 7 is important.
Yes.
Section 7 is very important.
Yeah. So assignability. So there's basically 3 options. So if a buyer wants to, they can either they can put a contract on the house and then they can either assign the contract to somebody else and then that particular buyer is no longer liable for purchasing the house. So basically, let me go through the rest of the options. Or they can assign but not be released from liability under the contract, or they can't assign the contract at all. So basically what this is, a lot of times you have these, they're like wholesale buyers.
Yep.
So they're putting a contract on a house. They're getting it for, let's say it's a $100,000 house, or they put a contract on the house for $100,000. They then take this contract and they turn around and they sell it to somebody else for $110,000 or $120,000, and then as soon as they do, then that person that initially signed, they're released from any further liability. Now it belongs to the next person. Yep. That one makes me nervous. I don't, if I see one come through with that on it, then no, I'm not. We're changing that. The second option there, may assign but not be released. I see this sometimes with investors, but also people that are, for now, they're putting it in their name, but they may want to assign it to a business that they own. They're still liable for it, but they may want to put it into their trust before they close, or they may want to put it in an LLC or some business name that they own. But they're still, so either it's going into a company that they own, but even if that company falls, the person is still liable to follow through with this contract.
Correct. Yeah. And so like you just need to make sure you have that clarity, as a seller.
Yes.
Because I've actually made that mistake. I was pushing back hard until someone explained to me. I'm like, no, this is like John Smith who's trying to put it in the Smith LLC family trust, like whatever it is.
Correct.
The Smith family trust. I'm like, oh, okay,
Correct.
that makes sense.
Yes.
I apologize.
Yep.
So like, but it's really important to understand what that section is. But by and large, majority of buyers are going to may not assign this contract, and that's really important too, because the seller wants to know who is really buying this property, because the seller can't ask who the person is, who's the buyer.
Correct.
I want to know who they are, what they do. That's a fair housing violation. You can't do that.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So essentially you want to show, this is how we know that the person is serious and actually intends on occupying the property. They may not assign this contract. So that's what that one is.
Right.
Financing.
Yep.
Yeah. Financing. It's pretty straightforward. It's either you're cash or you're not. So if you're financing, majority of buyers right now, which is technically about, let's see, so we had 27% of buyers were cash last year. So that means you're looking at, what is that, 33% of people, 73% of people are financing. So that's where you put Section B. This contract is contingent upon within 25-day loan approval, or 25-day order left blank, 30-day after the effective date loan approval period. So this right here is a little bit of a nuance. The loan approval period. All right. Mm-hmm. So say you have a 30-day contract, right? The loan approval period can't be more or equal to the days of the contract. It has to be less. And most listing agents will not accept a 29 or 28 or a 27 day of a 30-day contract loan approval period. So 25 days, pretty much you're saying that the buyer is going to get their financial statements, their docs, their W-2s, their bank statements, their proof of employment, the appraisal, the inspections, all within that 25-day period.
Correct.
And if day 24 comes along and the lender says, we cannot close your loan, you are not able to satisfy the conditions, therefore we have to deny you the loan. If you're within that 25-day loan approval period, you are safeguarded by this contingency, because it goes on to stipulate, saying that if you cannot satisfy the lender requirements, then you can leave the contract with your deposit. So that $10,000 that we have put up for escrow comes back to you. It doesn't mean that the seller won't fight for it, but if you can prove that you did diligent effort to everything you could to satisfy the conditions of the loan approval, then essentially you will get your deposit back. You will probably have to fight for it, but you're going to get it back in the eyes of the law. So, but if you're on day 26, 27, and the lender says, I'm sorry, we can't get this loan closed, you're denied, then you unfortunately have lost your deposit. And there's nothing you can argue for it. You can ask the seller, hey, will you split it in half? I need this money for the next house, please. Then, if the seller is good, then they'll be like, yeah, sure. You'll have half of it. Or they're going to be like, hey, you breached the contract. The 10,000 is fine. So it's really important, again, to set proper expectations with the lender, and your realtor needs to make sure you educated in this, knowing what's happening. Because again, getting these documents falls on you as a buyer. Correct.
All right. And so you have to be attentive to what the lender needs and get it ASAP. I mean, if when I was buying the house and I already had all of my stuff all ready to go, and if a month went by and we're not done, or if I knew I was getting a new statement coming from the bank or whatever, I went ahead and pulled it and I had it on the ready for when, because I know he's, the lender's going to ask for it, and then boom, I send it. So you have to be just, again, Johnny on the spot. You have to get that stuff over.
Yep.
If you're lollygagging and taking 3 or 4 days to get every request over to him, then yeah, it's going to make it tough.
You're setting yourself up for failure. I promise you, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yep.
Okay, so can you scroll it back up real quick? It's important to notate what type of loan you have. If it's conventional, FHA, VA, or other fixed rate or adjustable fixed rate, the seller does not need to know what your interest rate is. So that's none of their business.
Correct.
They do not need to know the terms, because you could be halfway through and you'd be like, you know what? I'm gonna actually put more money down. I would like to do a 15-year loan. Like if you have it written in contract, then like you're almost kind of stuck unless you get written permission from the seller agreeing to that. So other than that, the loan terms are yours. It's confidential information.
Yep. Okay? Yep. So the seller is just basically worried about, do you approve? Are you approved? Can you get approved? And how quick can they finalize it?
Yep. And are your terms realistic?
Correct.
Based on your situation.
Correct.
Line 97, buyer shall make application for financing. So that's your loan application within 5 days. You should have already done that before you put this offer in. Especially in today's market, you should. You should already be seeing the underwriter, all right? Having a conditional approval. Your bank statements are in, your tax transcripts are in. Already got a letter from an employer saying that you're already you're valid. You have a valid employment history. So like all of that stuff should be in. Okay, so that one is kind of irrelevant. But this part is really important. I'm going to read line 102 real quick. Buyer's failure to use good faith and diligent effort to obtain loan approval during loan approval period shall be considered a default under the terms of this contract. For purposes of this provision, quote, diligent effort, quote, includes, but is not limited to, timely furnishings all documents and information required by buyer's mortgage broker and lender, and paying for appraisal and other fees and charges in connection with the buyer's application for finance. So if you can't prove that you've done that, and you're outside, then you're effed. You're not going to get your deposit back.
Right.
So let's see here. We can kind of continue if you want me to read it here. But we have a lot. We're only on page 2 and we're an hour in. So let's kind of it's all really important.
So the whole point of going through this is to hit a lot of the highlights and to really help you understand what is in the contract. Ultimately it's up to you, if you're the one signing the contract, to fully go through and be aware of everything here. We're just, we want to make sure that we hit a lot of the highlights, what's in here, give you like, hey, yes, there is a financing section. There's a spot here that many people don't know, the section 7, and then all the other things that we've talked about. So that's kind of what the purpose of this episode is just to get you familiar with it. And again, if you want a copy of this one, you can email me, show at whiskey.com. Easy for me to say. And then you can go through it, and if you have questions about it, you can call Chris or I. And we'll help you out. So again, a lot of this, it's more about loan approvals and the loan approval period and everything. I don't think we need to really read through all of this stuff. I mean, there's good information in there. What's that?
There's a lot of the information, like the core meat and potatoes is within the first 7 pages. Everything else, or the first 5 pages. Everything else is disclosures, and then addendums, common disclosures and addendums that convey with the property. But this section right here coming up is really important. Closing costs, fees, and charges. We're in the era of know before you owe. Okay, so 2007, 2006, no one knew what they were signing. They were not being told what was going on. They did nothing. None of the like. All right. So it's really important to know before you owe. And that's what's really cool about this section right here on page 3, section 9 of the contract. So section A on line 138, 136, it says cost to be paid by seller. And it's broken down right there. You got the tax stamps on the deeds, the owner's policy, title search, municipal lien search, HOA, recording fees, seller fees, things of that nature. Those are all broken out and written out. And actually, some of these items are actually broken down further below, because you have like, what's an owner's policy? It breaks it down for you. What's the tax stamps? It breaks it down for you. HOA disclosure, down below, it breaks it down. And then you can see there on section B, costs to be paid by the buyer. You can see there, it's the same thing. Taxes, recording fees into the deed and financial statements, owner's policy, survey, lender's title policy, HOA, municipal lien search, loan expense, appraisal fee, buyer inspections. You can see that the buyer has a significant more costs that's charged to them. So again, know before you owe. And we're actually about to get into some of the sections regarding the owner's policy and the titler's policy. So if we want to scroll down just a little bit further, the title, evidence, and insurance is part of that section. Go down to part 2. You can see right there on line 168 on the fourth page there. So seller shall designate closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges, and buyer shall pay premium for the buyer's lender policy and charges for closing services related to lender's policy. Where that sounds so familiar. Where did I see that? Scroll back up. Oh, look. Line 138, owner's policy and charges. And then line 149 for the buyer, owner's policy and charges. And then if you go to the next section here, lender's title policy, line 151, lender's title policy and endorsements. So again, like, it's breaking it down what all this stuff means.
Right.
And so, or the so that was line 168, line 172. Buyer shall designate a closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges. So therefore, it's just like, which one are you going to go with? You have to choose that. In this most common now, Jared, for me that I see is that the seller has already stipulated what lawyer or title company they want to go with. So if that's the case, if they've already stipulated who they want to go with, you check off that box, 168.
Correct. Yeah,
but it doesn't mean that the buyer can't offer. Doesn't mean that the buyer can't offer to pay for the seller's policy. It just means the buyer is going to pay more money at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's so right now. I mean, everything is pretty much just being left alone with this section. Your option 1 was being checked, but in a time before when we weren't in such a seller's market, buyers could actually negotiate some of these things. Like, hey, you pay, the seller's going to pay this, the seller's going to pay that. They're going to give me some money towards my closing. But right now, everything is just kind of staying this, as the seller pays what they pay and the buyer pays what they pay. And that's kind of how everything is left. I'm almost surprised that some sellers haven't started getting greedy and saying, I mean, they're getting so much money for their houses right now, but that they're not getting greedy and saying, hey, I mean, I'm, instead of getting over asking price, how about you give me some, give me some extra towards my closing, or you pay.
I'm seeing it, man.
Are you seeing that? I'm not seeing that as much over here.
They're getting above asking. They're getting their closing costs paid for. I'm seeing like ballsy sellers, saying no contingencies. I called one agent. That house was on the market for 12 days. I called her, and I was just like, "Do you really expect a buyer to waive the contingency?" She goes, "We're actually signing a contract right now." And I'm just like, "Wow,
wow, oh, holy cow!"
no inspection period contingency, no appraisal contingency, no financing contingency. I'm like, "Is this a finance deal?" She goes, "Yep." I'm like, "What the fuck?"
Oh my goodness!
People are stupid. Buyer's remorse will be at an all-time high. Mark my words, man. They're going to be at an all-time high by the end of this year. You're going to see more houses start coming up for sale because they hate their house.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So the next section doesn't pertain to us, lane 174. That's Miami-Dade. Like that doesn't pertain to Central Florida unless only in that area.
Yes. Yep. And they kind of do their own thing down there, so it's a bit different.
Dude,
but
wild.
Yes, it's a different animal down there.
Mm-hmm.
We're a little bit more civilized up here, right?
Careful now.
I know. This next section, just talking about the survey. At least 5 days prior to closing date, buyer may, at buyer's expense, have properties or have the real property surveyed and certified by a registered Florida surveyor. So basically, there's nothing you can change in here. This is just more of the terms that are hard coded into this contract, but something good to know. The one that you used to be able to negotiate this a little bit more a while back, but home warranty right now, NA is typically the box that I'm seeing checked, unless I've seen on occasion now where, for example, the AC is just super super old and it still works. It passed inspection. We actually, on one of the houses I had listed, the buyer came back and they wanted like $8,000 in concessions and all this, and I was like, hey, we'll give you a home warranty that's worth like $500 because I know you're concerned about the 2 air conditionings that are old, and here's your home warranty. If they break, then you pay your deductible and get you a new AC or you get it fixed. They walked from the deal. They didn't want anything. I was like, okay, guess what we did? We got another contract. We sold it for over asking price. So we were being nice, and we didn't give any concessions. We were being nice by giving them a home warranty.
Yeah, because you're not obligated. You're not obligated. And
no,
as
not at all.
Contracts, sellers are not obligated. As
correct.
Is.
As is.
Okay.
As is.
As is.
So
you can ask all you want, but the seller reserves the right to say no.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no.
We'll get further into correct. We'll get more into like the meat and potatoes, because that is the meat and potatoes. It's the inspection period right there.
Yep.
So
special assessments. Okay. I'm gonna touch on this just real, unless you have anything to add to it. But special assessments, normally the box here, box A is checked. Even if you don't check a box, here it says if neither box is checked, then option A shall be deemed the selected. So basically, seller shall pay installments due to prior to closing, and the buyer shall pay installments due after closing. So special assessments, let's talk about that real quick. Special assessments are just basically, let's say the city is coming in to pave a new road, and they're going to have some of the residents that are going to benefit. They're going to have the residents help pay for this road. It might not be 100%. Maybe sometimes the city will pick up half of the bill, and then the residents pick up the other half. The way they get you on it is they'll charge you when you pay your property tax or something like that, but that would be called a special assessment. So essentially, the seller, when option A is checked, as we talked about, the seller is going to pay whatever installments are due, so whatever monthly payments or prorated or whatever the case is, up until the time they sell the house or the closing date, and then after that, the buyer takes over and pays the rest of it. Option B, which I've had some agents check, and it's, chances of there being a special assessment during that, short period that you're going to be going to a closing or waiting to close on a house, slim to, maybe doesn't happen. However, if it does happen and option B is checked, guess what? You as the seller has to pay the full. So if the full installment has to pay everything for the assessment. So if it's a $20,000 assessment that's being paid out over the next 10 years, guess what? You have to pay the $20,000 before and it's due at closing. So that's why for me, I typically never let somebody talk me into having, as a listing agent, I don't let a buyer's agent talk me into, well, my broker says we always check this box and that's the one that we check. And I'm like, well, that's too bad. You're the one that wants to buy the house. So therefore it's going to be option A. But
what sometimes, so I'm going to compound like a compound with your saying, if you're a seller who doesn't know if you have a special assessment, I don't default you for that, but at the same time, you should know that. You should be attending to your local meetings. You should be looking at mail that comes in from the county or from the city or from the state regarding stuff that's going to be happening, especially new constructions or infrastructure stuff. It's really important.
It's called being a responsible homeowner.
Exactly. It's part of your job as a homeowner and a
Correct.
citizen of the state or the city, or the US, excuse me.
Yeah.
So like, and I've seen it to where sellers pay the whole assessment. And I've seen it to where the buyers expect the seller to pay for the whole assessment. And I've seen it where sellers, like during the municipal lien search, um,
Mm-hmm.
in the town and a title search, to where all parties get hit by surprise and they're like, yeah, there's an assessment and it's going to be 10 grand over the next 5 years. And it's just like, what the hell? Like, and he's just like, is that why my taxes jumped? And it's like, yeah, that's why your
Yeah.
taxes jumped. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
he's like, oh, I didn't know why. And I'm like, well, now you do. So
Right.
that it forced the buyer to walk away because it was not to what they thought it was. And
Yeah.
it hurt their DTI, their
Mm-hmm.
debt to income ratio. If it's too high
Correct.
because of the taxes are too high, instead
Yep.
of paying like $150 a month for taxes, which is still a little high, it jumped to $300 a month, and like that's significant.
Right.
So it's really
And
important to understand, especially if you get into a property, if there is special assessments in it.
right. Now, this doesn't apply to special assessments from like a condominium or an HOA
Okay.
or something like
Entirely
that. This is
different.
only for city and like
Taxes.
municipality and or county, assessments, things like that. So it has nothing. It's totally separate from
Mhm.
an HOA assessment or a condominium assessment or something like that. So let's see.
This next section we're gonna breeze through like crazy. So
Yeah.
disclosure. So if the property falls under the conditions, so this is the contract, right? It's a 12-page report. If the property falls under certain conditions, then disclosures need to be applied. So radon gas, permits disclosure, mold. If you're in a flood zone, you're going to need some of these documents that you can see there.
Right.
Section D, flood zone certificate, elevation certificate. It's very
Right.
important, especially when it comes to insurances. If you keep
Yes.
going, you got an energy brochure. That is required by law that a realtor has to give you energy brochure. The lead-based paint.
Correct.
And if you're a lead-based paint disclosure, if your home is older than 1978, that disclosure has to be provided by you as the seller to the buyer. You need to
Correct.
disclose if you know of any lead-based paint disclosure. If you don't know, then say you don't know.
Right.
If you're in an HOA community, you have to have the HOA disclosure, property tax disclosure summary if there's something
Mm-hmm.
going on there. If you're a foreigner and you don't reside here in the States and you own property and you go to sell it, you are we call it FIRPTA, the Foreign Investment Real Estate Property Tax Act. um the seller's disclosure, you want to take over for that one?
Well, you're pretty much at
I'm
the
on
end,
a
but
roll.
yeah.
All right. So yeah, the seller's disclosure. I'll wrap it up. So
Okay.
the seller's disclosure. This is a really, 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 really important one. Every single property has to have a seller's disclosure. If you are a
Yes.
seller, you have to disclose all known facts, material facts not readily observable by the buyer. So it's
Correct.
in regards to roof, in regards to appliances, plumbing, electrical,
Whether
flood,
leaks and yeah.
leaks, all of it. It's a simple yes, no, I don't know questionnaire. You
Yep.
cannot lie on this because
No.
if it comes out that you are lying, you are held
Mm-hmm.
liable. You
Yes.
could be fined. You could be jailed if it's severe enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the state of Florida at least, is a huge cop out for flippers to come in here, flip a
Yes, it is.
property,
God,
and
I
then
hate that.
not fill this out.
I hate it.
It pisses me
Hate
off. I try to convince the listing agent, hey, listen, do you think it's more protective for a seller, for your flipper, to go in and mark this? We've replaced the roof, we've replaced the
Right.
plumbing, we've done this, we saw an electrical issue, we corrected this, than it is to say I don't know when obviously you've stripped the whole house and you've fixed it.
Right.
Oh, well, that's not my decision. I'm like, you're not a good agent, bro.
But it's
so like, so,
yeah.
you're not a good
And
agent.
it's but they use that disconnect. So we were working on a deal through Open Door. I was working with a buyer and Open Door. So Open Door is a company that comes in, they'll buy a house from a homeowner and then they'll fix it up or fix it up. They'll come in and put makeup on it. Let me put it that way. They'll make it look nice. And But that seller's disclosure, they literally, they write at the top, seller never lived here, and then don't know for every single question. And there were things wrong with the house that, I mean, electrical issues, it was clear, but they have the option to mark it as don't know because they don't live there. They never did, even though they hired a contractor to come in there and put in new tile, new drywall, new all this stuff, but they removed themselves from. My guess is they tell the contractor, say, hey, come in and fix everything, or come in and do this, and this. Don't tell me anything else about the house, because if you tell me, I've got to mark it down.
Mm-hmm. And they're being held liable. But the thing is, like, you're not saying anything makes you held more liable, in my opinion. Like, that's what I do everything I can to convince them. It's incredibly baffling and incredibly aggravating.
But unfortunately, our opinions don't hold up in court. It's only the facts.
I'm pretty sure something has changed in that regard, where you can no longer say you no longer reside. You have to complete it. Even if you don't know, you have to mark you don't know.
Right. Well, no,
if you're a flipper, bro, you should protect yourself, dude.
Oh yeah.
Protect yourself. All right.
Stop. Don't ride on the limits or the confines of the contract to get you out of, or let you skate by certain situations.
Or you think that's going to let you skate by certain situations, because it's not. Because if you're that shitty of a flipper and a buyer is that vindictive enough to take you to court, you will lose.
Yes.
You will lose. I promise you will lose. Because the proof is in the pudding and the shitty work that you did. Okay.
Yes.
Here's section 11. I love this section. It's actually really funny because so many times the seller, once they're under contract, they think they don't have to take care of the property anymore.
Right.
I.e. cut the grass, tend to the pool, or if there's a plumbing leak that like they think they don't have to fix it anymore because it's under contract. It's like the house is still under your name. Therefore, you must maintain it. Yes. And the thing is, like, you have to maintain it. There have been many times where during the inspection period or during the actual initial visit, there was no issues. And then during the inspection period, we discover a leak. And it's just like, oh, we have an active leak. That's an active problem. You have to maintain it because we did not see this property in this condition. So there's a big difference.
Correct.
And the buyer is entitled to a final walkthrough, which we'll get to here in a section 2. And that kind of falls into play with it, to where like at the final walkthrough, you see appliances missing, or now there's a leak, or the AC has stalled and it's hot as hell inside the house. Those are all still part of the property maintenance, and the buyer can say, "Timeout, fix this," because it's all under the property maintenance.
Yes. So it's when you're putting a contract on the house, you're putting it on the condition that it is at that time that you sign this contract, except for, like it says here, except for ordinary wear and tear and casualty loss, such as if a big storm came through or something. But ordinary wear and tear, that's the key thing right here. So if something huge happens, like you said, a leak, then you got to fix it. If the AC breaks during, if it completely gets destroyed, yes, you have to fix it. Or you have to go to the buyer and say, hey, we're not going to fix it, but we'll give you a credit. Like, well, you got to do something. You can't just assume that you can't just pass the house on without addressing that issue.
Yeah. So if it's all about like what was the condition of the property during the time that you saw it initially, not during contract, not during inspection, but when time you saw it. If you're walking into a property and the door is like clearly broken, like off of one of the 3 hinges, and then that doesn't fall under property maintenance because you're not under contract, right? Correct. So essentially, like if by the time you close and that door is still off its hinge,
Yep.
You saw it like that, okay?
Right.
So like that could be like considered normal wear and tear, or a fascia like off of the roof is like hanging there, and you saw it
Mm-hmm.
like that. You go under contract. You can't come to the seller and be like, "Hey, I want you to fix
Correct.
that." You can try,
Correct.
but you're buying
You
it
could
as
try.
is. So that
Right.
means you're buying it knowing that the fascia is broken off. Okay.
Yep.
So like it has to be only now again like, but if you're under contract and you do a drive by of the property, or if you have right to have access to the property and you see that the fascia is broken and it wasn't before, or the AC is
Right.
not working
Right.
when it was before, therefore that falls under the property maintenance, because at that point you're under contract knowing that the condition that you saw it in is the way it's going to be maintained until you actually purchase the property. So
Right.
that's like my favorite section. I love calling out
and it's such a small section, but it's so powerful.
So powerful. It has huge repercussions to it.
I mean, look at it. It's 3 lines. It's 3 lines here, and but it has so much power behind it.
Yeah.
So
this section that right here that we're about to read, the this is the meat and potatoes. This has less power than, in my opinion, like in comparison to the section 11.
Yeah. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this talks about the property inspection. So this is the time that you're allowing yourself as a buyer to come in and do basically all of your due diligence. And if you want to read it, I've got it up on the screen. If you're watching this, you can read through it. But essentially, this is your time to do all of your due diligence. So you're going to do a property inspection, like a home inspection. If you want to inspect, if you have some old plumbing, you want to have cameras run through the lines to check for anything like cast iron. That's highly recommended that you would get those cameraed. Have an AC guy come out, have a roofing guy come out. Typically, your home inspector is going to look at all of the stuff anyways, but it's sometimes
if you want specific people, if you
want specific, maybe the inspector says, hey, yeah, that AC is pretty old, it's past its life expectancy. You might want to have somebody come out and check it. Then you call an AC guy and they come out and say, yeah, it's in great shape. It's going to last for so you're getting that other professional opinion that they're coming out and telling you. Same thing with roofs. So this is your time to do all of that due diligence, but it's not also the due diligence just on the house. This is your time to, let's say you're buying a property that you want to add a shed. So this is your time to figure out, am I allowed to add a shed? Can I, should I call, you got to call the city or the county to figure out what are the setbacks, and or are there any restrictions about adding a shed? So you got to find out everything that you want to do with the property. Can you? So, and this is the time that you do that. I put 10 days in there. Right now I'm seeing inspection periods somewhere anywhere between 5 and 10 days. I've had them with 5 days. I've had them with 10 days, 7 days. It depends. 3 days. But if you have to know when that inspection period starts, when you sign this thing, if you're doing it for 3 days, man, you better have all your ducks in a row. You better have your home inspector, you better have all the phone numbers to the county and the city and whatever you want to check out there, your roof guy, your electric guy, all that stuff.
Air quality control guy, whatever it is.
But
it's just
the nice thing with this section is if there's, for any reason, it doesn't even have to be that there's something wrong with the house. For any reason, as a buyer and sellers, this is good to know too, because if a buyer says, I don't, I changed my mind, and it could be for absolutely any reason. They could just wake up the next morning and decided, this is not for me. They're going to cancel the contract. As a seller, you don't have any recourse. There's nothing you can do. You can ask, why are they canceling? They don't have to tell you anything. And as a buyer's agent, they should not reveal that information unless it's, something home related. But I've had some where I had a buyer that they just change their mind, and they have every right to cancel the contract. But I didn't want to go down any slippery roads of, saying the wrong thing. So I just said, hey, we're canceling it. Here's the cancel and release. Sign it, and then we're good. And then we'll go our separate ways. But when you're canceling something, what do you normally do, Chris?
So it's a really important contract because it really is about sole discretion. And if
Yes.
there is issues with the house, which happens, and even with the as is, it's really important to understand that you can absolutely ask. And it's especially if it's
Yes.
something that is going to hold up either financing or not, it's better to be a buyer and divulge the information. Because if something comes up that's going to hurt the insurance aspect of things, it's super important to divulge that information. And especially if it's something that you're claiming that you would like to have fixed, you have to provide proof. So that's where you get the inspection reports, and you provide the report or just a section of the report saying that, hey, listen, this is the AC's and deficiency is still running, but it needs to be just just be maintenance. And a lot of sellers would be like, yeah, that's fine. I'll pay $100 to have it maintenance. And then you're good to go. But if it's going to be something that's going to be an issue for insurance, and you can provide proof that it's an issue with insurance, such as the roof, the plumbing, the AC, or the electrical, it's going to show up in a particular report called the 4-point. And that's usually for homes older than 30 years.
Right.
And so the insurance company is going to say you have been denied, or it will not be happening until it's replaced. And you provide those emails to the seller along with the 4-point. Then you're building a case. Hey, listen, seller, unless you get these addressed, we can't close. And by the way, if you're not willing to address this, we're going to cancel. Good luck finding another buyer that's not going to have the same issue unless they're cash.
Right.
So it's really just because it's a as is, the seller you have the right to say you can ask. So you have the right to ask, but they have a right to know. Doesn't mean that it can't work. Okay, it's always worth the ask. And if you're and ultimately if there are issues that come up, and ultimately the buyer is just like, I'm not feeling it. This is too many issues. I don't want to go through that process of asking. I think it's good faith of a buyer to supply that information in those reports to the seller. That way they can address these issues and help the next buyer or help their own cause. Because we're all in the same position. They want to sell, you want to buy, but you're not feeling comfortable with it.
Right.
And they still want to sell. But if you're not willing to release that information, because we can't, as realtors, can't give that because you paid for it. As a buyer, you paid for that.
Right.
So we have to have your permission to get it. But I'm always going to ask my buyers, can we please help the sellers because send it over, help them, that way they can address the issues and then supply it. Because again, they sign that seller's property disclosure, releasing all material facts not readily observable at a buyer. Well, if they didn't know that some of these issues had occurred, but now they do, they can go and correct that. They have to go back.
They have to go back and change that seller's disclosure.
Yeah, it's just about being a good person. Like unfortunately, it didn't work out. As so long as nothing was vindictive, then like let's help the fellow man. All right.
Right.
Let's help them.
Yep.
As well. So the next that's the core of the meat potatoes. All right.
So the rest of this stuff, so I'm kind of thinking, that there's not a whole lot.
Nothing. There's nothing.
Yeah, it's
nothing behind it.
Here's the walkthrough part of it. So basically before your the day before your the day before your closing, you should do a walkthrough inspection. So basically on the day prior to closing date or on the closing date, so you could do either one. But basically before closing, you do a walk through the property, and you're just basically making sure that the selling the property and it's as required by the as-is maintenance requirement. It has met all other contractual obligations. So basically, the property is as it should be, as you expected. It meets all of the terms that you agreed on. So if you've agreed on washer and dryer staying there, then guess what? That washer and dryer should still be there. Certain appliances or whatever the case may be, furniture, whatever it is, all that stuff should be there for your walkthrough. If it's not there, then step on the brakes, talk to your agent and say, hey, what's going on? And figure out, what needs to, how do we remedy? So,
so is the final walkthrough should always be taking place within 24 to 48 hours of the close date.
Yep.
And it says right there, inspection of the property solely to confirm that all items of personal property are on the property. So personal property, going back to the first page of the contract, personal property are on the property, and verify the seller has maintained, again, section 11, property maintenance, maintain the property as required by the as-is maintenance requirement and has met all other contractual obligations. So again, you're there to do a final walkthrough for two things. Predominantly is just to make sure that all personal items are still there that you agreed upon, and that the property has been maintained throughout the requirements and all other contracts and obligations. So like the next section right here is the seller assistance and cooperation and close out all building permits. That happens sometimes. Sometimes there are open permits. And if it takes a long time to close out a permit, then buyer, you agreeing right here in contract saying that you're agreeing to allow and help and assist the seller to close out any permits, because you don't want any open permits.
Right.
Like if there's an old permit from like early 2000s for electrical, you're going to want to make sure that's done correctly.
Yeah.
So
and a lot of times the closing company or the title company, when they're doing all their searches and everything, they'll find these things. We had one when I sold my old house. We had an open air conditioning inspection or a permit. And it was an open permit, and it was just because the final install hadn't been inspected. I don't know what happened. It was like that when we bought the house. We bought the house bank, so I'm sure it got overlooked or whatever. And when we went to sell it, the title company had said, "Hey, what's going on with the air conditioning?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Oh, we have an open inspection." So guess what? I got on the phone with the city, said, "Hey, we need to get there's a permit that's still open. We need to get it inspected." Within like a couple of days, they sent somebody out and they did the inspection, closed out the permit. Everything was good. But that's basically what it's saying. You want to have everything closed out. But like I said, the title company is going to be pretty good about finding that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So
next section.
Next section. So we're almost done. I mean, as we said, most of the stuff.
One more section right there below it. Assignment of repair, treatment, contracts, and warranties.
Yep.
So a lot of times here in Florida, we have termite bonds. We have PACE loans. We have AC warranties, roof warranties, all that stuff at buyer's options and costs. Seller will, at closing, assign all assignable repair, treatment, maintenance, contracts, and warranties to the buyer. Nice and simply put. If you have like a termite warranty, a termite bond, as a seller, it's good to keep that renewed. Don't let it expire. I really advocate that you don't let it expire.
Yep.
Make that as a selling point.
Yeah.
And then give that to have them transfer it over. The buyer will have to pay a transfer warranty. That's fine. It's no sweat off your back. And then essentially that way it kind of helps them. So buyers ask if there's any warranties. If the roof is brand new, are there any warranties on those shingles? Are there?
There should
the
be.
AC's new. Is there a warranty? If a good seller will pay for a warranty, that's a huge selling point.
Yep. And a lot of those kind of warranties, especially like on roofs and things, when you get a roof, there's going to be a warranty, and there's usually like a one-time transfer. Depending on the roofing company, but there's usually at least a one-time transfer. So if I buy a roof and the warranty is under my name, I get one time that I can transfer that warranty to somebody else. So, it's
we're almost done, people. I promise. Because
I know
the escrow agent and broker escrow. Okay, the word escrow is used in a lot of ways. There's the escrow deposit, The
Yep.
escrow officer is pretty much the title company or lawyer.
Right.
There's the escrow for your mortgage, which covers your taxes and insurance.
Yep.
It's kind of one of those universal terms, such as like a
Yes.
broker. So your
Mm-hmm.
broker is going to be your real estate agent. So essentially, like here's like a definition of who they are, what they're adhered to in terms of state stature,
Mm-hmm.
and liabilities. That's it.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
after that, I think it's pretty much standards after that section, after those two sections.
Yeah, professional advice, broker liability. So these are all things that, it's like I said before, it's definitely good to go through and read these on your own. What we're doing, what?
Keep going.
Oh, what we're doing is just trying to make you aware of all the different sections in the contract, especially some of the highlights, the things that get filled out. These are all things that if you ask Chris or I to come in, if let's say you do go through and read it, and you're like, hey, I don't really agree with this part right here. Can we change that? No, we can't. I mean, we can't. We can,
but we're not lawyers.
We have to get exactly. We have to get lawyers involved. Chris and I cannot strike this section out and go and put in our own verbiage. That's not how that works.
Nope,
and I've talked to agents where they've had or sellers try to strike entire sections and rewrite part of it, and they wouldn't do it. They said, "Well, sure, yeah, I'll help you find a lawyer who can help you with that. And once they approve it and get it done, then I'll continue with the contract."
And
but
I'm telling you right now, a good lawyer would be like, no, because this contract, and all the other addendums and terms are made between the Florida realtors,
yes,
and the Florida bar.
correct.
So it's technically called the FAR bar as this contract, the FAR bar contract. So
correct.
like these are people who are the elite of the elite in terms of understanding and on the front lines of writing policies and duking it out, and based on all the claims and litigations that have occurred over the years. So these things change almost every single year.
Oh yeah.
To better help the public understand it. Protection on both sides, and ultimately to stay current with the real estate trends and what's happening in today's market perpetually.
Right.
All right. So this next section right here, default and dispute resolution, this is huge because it ultimately tells you what in the event of a buyer default, in the event of a seller default, and the dispute resolution, because there's always money on the line. And that's what the dispute resolution comes
especially with this contract, there's $10,000 on the line. So
yeah, with this contract, if Jared and I have a dispute and I want my 10 grand back, and he says go fly a kite, I'm like, well, and we can't come to an agreement, then we're gonna go into a dispute resolution. We're gonna after this, the buyer and seller will have 10 days after the date of conflicting demands for the deposit are made to attempt to resolve such dispute, following in which buyer and seller shall submit a dispute to mediation under the paragraph 16B, which is the next section. So we're going to go, Jared and I are going to sit in front of a mediator, and we're going to duke it out. And we're going to see if we can come to a resolution for the 10 grand. Whether I keep it, he keeps it, or we split it in half and call it a day. If we cannot come to an agreement, we're going to go to court. And I promise you it's going to cost a lot more than 10 grand. Because if one of us loses, or if we both end up losing, or if we end up like having to split it, guess what? We have, not only we're going to take that 5 grand. If we have to split it, we're going to take that 5 grand and turn right around and pay our attorneys and the court.
Yes.
Does it freaking make sense? No, but people do it. I've had escrow disputes over, it's $1,000 escrow. And it was
it's almost not even worth it.
He was just like, I'm taking him to court based on principle. I'm like, that is so fucking dumb. That is so dumb. Based on principle? you're going to spend $5,000 just to save 1,000. And he
Right.
just was so fuming. And I get it. When people see red, they don't care. It's like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
based on principle. I'm like,
Yeah.
that makes no sense. Like F your principle.
Because
And
at the end of the day, you still lose.
yeah,
It,
100%.
whether you win on principle, you're still
regardless.
losing. You're still
Yeah.
losing.
Some people will
So
be like, people who have money like that they don't care. It's just like,
right.
man, your ego's so fragile.
I know.
So here's the last section. Promise you guys. Standards for
Yeah.
real estate. Standards is a fancy term of saying definitions.
Correct.
So
yeah.
What is title? Here's your definition of title. Next
So
section.
you'll see some of the previous sections. They'll reference to section 18. You know, section or standards section A.I or whatever it is. So this is where these standards are. So again, good things to look through so you understand what everything means. But again, nothing. You're not going to change anything in here. This is just this is more informational and definitions.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
ingress, negress, lease, force majeure. There's another further definition.
Yes.
Ooh, we got to go through time. Time.
Where'd I?
We have to find time because time is really important. Not there yet.
1031 waiver FERPTA. I don't know.
You're going too fast. Hey, you skipped over it.
I did.
Your screen is like glitchy. Go back up. Let's see.
I'm going. There's section F under standards.
So this is really important for people to understand because there's a lot of issues going on right now.
Yes.
So I'm just gonna read it.
Calendar that's days. One thing we.
Yeah, we need to read this one. Yeah, calendar days based on where the property is located. So eastern, western, whatever it is, based on property is located, shall be used in computing time periods, other than time for acceptance and effective date as set forth in paragraph 3. Any time periods provided for or dates specified in this contract, whether pre-printed, handwritten, typewritten, or inserted herein, which shall end or occur on a Saturday, Sunday, national legal public holiday, or a day in which a national legal public holiday is observed because it fell on a Saturday or Sunday, shall extend to the next calendar day, which is not a Saturday, Sunday, national legal public holiday, or a day in which a national legal public holiday is observed. So,
oh my God, I'm so confused. Can you explain that in
yes, I can.
Layman's terms, please?
Yep. So there are 2 days. There are calendar days and there are business days. So essentially, the first thing for deposit, the first day is the deposit. All right. So the deposit falls on a business day because it involves a bank and it involves a title company to verify. All right. So if we go into contract today, so say Jared and I go into contract today, which is a perfect example. Today is Thursday. I have 3 days to get in the escrow deposit, my $5,000 or 10 total. Well, today we signed. Tomorrow is day 1 of the contract.
Correct.
So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Well,
so your escrow is due on Sunday.
But it can't happen because banks aren't open and title company is not open to verify. So
breach of contract.
Automatically, yeah, exactly. Right? But it doesn't happen like that. So it automatically defaults to the next business day, Monday.
Correct.
So
Monday, unless Monday is a holiday.
If Monday is a national holiday or a reserved holiday, then it goes to Tuesday.
Yes. So it goes to the next business day. So not counting holidays, but then it's it cuts off at 5 p.m. So you have to have it done by. So when it defaults, when it goes to the next business day like that, it cuts off at 5 p.m.
Correct. It cuts off at 5. And that's what we're saying, like, too, with the exception of the acceptance date and the effective date, those can happen at any point in time. I can get a call right now at 9:30 p.m. from a seller, from a listing agent saying that, hey, your seller has accepted the contract. Awesome. Tomorrow
Right.
starts day 1 of that contract. So long as
Correct.
it's still before 11:59 p.m. For the next day, then we're like, you're good. Yeah,
Yep.
the next day follows suit.
There is a little technicality in there though. If an agent called you and to say, hey, we're signing, they send you the signed contract. Technically, today wouldn't be the effective date unless you sent your seller or unless you gave the contract to your buyer, to your client. So if you don't give it to them till the next day, then the next day is the
No,
effective date.
not necessarily, because I know exactly what you're talking about, because you're the one that's in receipt of it.
You as the agent, but the buyer has to get.
But I'm a representative of the buyer. This is one of those gray areas, people, where we can have that debate and be like, well, I'm an extension of the buyer because I represent the buyer. Just because I was asleep at 11 p.m. when you sent it over doesn't automatically mean I have received it the next day. It doesn't mean that next day.
Is it?
I have to receive it.
Yeah,
that's my argument. If I was asleep at 11 and today or tomorrow starts day 1, then that's what it is. Like, I don't wake up and say, cool, tomorrow starts the next day, start 2 days later. Like, that doesn't fly in my professional opinion. So
so but again, those
gray area,
little gray areas that it's like, yes, I am representing my client, the buyers, but if you send it to me at 11 o'clock and I receive it, but I don't send it to my buyers until the next day, they haven't seen it. It's kind of weird.
The thing is,
it depends. Honestly, it depends on who you talk to, how that's interpreted, because I've had both sides. I've had both sides of that.
Yeah, I've actually been into a couple of agreements or disagreements, because you can have an acceptance, but if you're still working on contracts and initials, finding out the detail, that final initial, if it takes a day and a half to get that final initial, that final executed contract has to come back to me before it is considered an effective contract.
Correct. Bilateral.
Right? So the next day. So if it takes like 2 days and the agent says, hey, today's the effective date, and it's like, no, we didn't get this contract back until today, not yesterday.
Right.
Well, we agreed. They're like, yeah, we agreed, but it wasn't finalized because we didn't have signatures or initials. Like, I've been waiting for you. We've been going back and forth on these initials for 2 days. So technically today is the effective date. Tomorrow starts day 1. And I've been into that discussion. It's like, no, like, that doesn't, she's like, that doesn't work that way. And I'm like, it does.
Right.
And I'll automatically, instead of like button heads, I'm like, go talk to your broker, go talk to your legal counsel, and then like come back to me. And ultimately, like, I was right, because I'm like, you don't have an effective agreement until all parties have the final executed document.
Correct.
All the initials, all signatures. This is it right here. And it even goes far enough to where if there's a mistake on the lead-based paint disclosure that someone didn't sign or initial, technically you're not under a contract.
It's not an executed contract.
It's not an executed contract, because
that's what
part of the contract in those disclosures, if it's required for the lead-based paint disclosure to be a part of that, then and it's not completed contract, then you're not under contract.
So let's say this real quick. This is where really good agents are separated from just mediocre agents, because your agent is going to be your first line of defense to make sure that contract that you're putting on the house, that you're either buying the house or as a seller, the contract that you're receiving from a buyer is correct, it's fully executed, and that other party is going to be held liable should they breach contract. If something were to happen and then, hey, by the way, there's technically this is not a legal contract because we didn't have all of our initials or signatures or dates or whatever the case may be, man, you're fighting an uphill battle at that point.
You're going to. Yeah. And you may think that you're right, and you know what? Morally, you could be right, but
ultimately, when it goes in front of an arbitrator, in front of a judge, that judge is going to he or she, they're only going to look at the legality of the contract. Is this contract enforceable or is it not? If it's not fully executed, I'm sorry, it's not enforced. I can't enforce something that's not fully executed.
Yep.
So,
unless you can prove the malice intent.
Right. Yep.
You have to prove that they did it maliciously,
Yep.
with malice. So,
force majeure, we talked about that. This is defining all the different events, things that could happen to prevent you from closing, closing on time, or right there, closing. 442 cause prevented hurricanes, floods,
hurricanes.
Yes, hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, fires, or other acts of God.
God.
See, and here's.
Oh, look at that. There's a new one right there. Insurgents, wars, insurgents, civil unrest, or acts of terrorism, governmental actions, and mandates such as, I don't know, a pandemic.
Right here.
Governmental
pandemic.
Shutdowns. Oh, shit. There it is. Epidemics.
Pandemic. I don't remember. Was pandemic in the last one?
No.
No?
Not even terrorism. Acts of terrorism.
Okay.
Not even
there. See?
Government mandates. Nope.
So this goes to show these contracts are updated, and when they're updated for a reason based on things that have happened. Exactly. Things that have occurred. So they're trying to update it to cover as much, as many things as they can to make sure it's a fair contract for both sides. Not just one side, not just the seller, not just the buyer, but it's a fair contract for all parties involved.
Yep. And check this out. You can even see it there, line 450. Force majeure event continues to prevent performance under this contract more than 30 days beyond closing date. Either party can terminate this contract and deliver a written notice of other, and the deposit shall be refunded to the buyer.
Yep. So again, these are good things to read through to really understand if worst case scenario, something happens, what is going, how is this contract interpreted? What are you do, and what is this, as a buyer, and what does the seller do as a party to this contract? Let's keep moving down here. Conveyance. Again, a lot of this is just, it's all going to be more definitions. For the sake of time, I really want to jump down to, I know my screen is probably glitching out on you here because I'm fast, but let's go down to the addendum section here, or addenda section 19. So this is if you have any extra contingencies or addendums or anything like that. Well, I mean, one of them, for example, lead-based paint. We talked about that one. If your house was built prior to 1978, you have to have a lead-based paint disclosure. And when you do, that box is going to be checked. If you have an appraisal contingency, which
Chris, redundant. We didn't discuss that, but you and I discussed it.
Well, Chris and I discussed that off air, but yeah. So this is kind of this section right here. This addendum is sort of built into the contract. There are some nuances to it where this could help you out, but for the most part, if we're using this, it's best just to consult with your agent. But again, all of this whole section is for all the different addendums. If you're an FHA, you got to have an addendum. Short sale, you got to have an addendum. Homeowners and flood insurance, that's a separate addendum. And it actually talks about it up in earlier in the contract. So
defective drywall, that's common for 2002 to 2007 homes. Gotta have it. You gotta have it. Even if you don't have it, you gotta have it. You gotta have that addendum.
Right. Pre-closing occupancy, that's one I did just recently to save a deal that I was trying to keep everything together, and the sellers, we couldn't close on time, and the buyers, I was working with the buyers too, and they were just like, man, we really need to get into this house, and so we were able to make it all work. Bless you.
Thank you.
So, so these are going to be all the extra addendums, and bless you again.
Thank you. Additional terms. Additional terms is quite easy.
Yes.
If there's something else, like so, if the buyer was going to pay the closing costs to the seller, or if the seller is going to pay closing costs to the
Right.
buyer, if one of some of the most common things right now is escalation clause. Escalation
Yes.
clause meaning that hey, your list price is 150,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm gonna offer you up to 170. Um, Beating the next or the highest offer by $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the sake of time and nuance, I'm not really going to get into it. There's escalation that's really important. It's really prominent right now, or really popular. That's the word I'm looking for. Appraisal gap coverage. So if you go into contract for 150,000 and the appraisal comes in at 130, the appraisal gap coverage is saying that the borrower or the buyer is promising to bring up 5,000, 10,000, or the
Right.
entirety difference because your contract is here, the appraisal is here, you're covering that gap in between of a certain amount or all, not to exceed the contract price.
Yep.
And so there's all kinds of things I've written out into the additional terms.
Yep.
Non-occupying co-borrower,
Yep.
title purpose only
Right.
buyers. So they're not part of the lender. They're like, so I guess here's an example. A husband and wife. A husband is buying it completely, but the wife
Mm-hmm.
is also on contract because she needs to be on title, or he wants her to be on title. So
Okay.
it's pretty much a non co-borrower occupant.
Okay. Yeah.
Or just to disclose that,
Yeah.
all kinds of things.
Yep.
It could be anything.
So
Down there.
this is where you can be, and usually when you put stuff in this area and this additional terms, it's usually pretty straightforward. We're not writing brand new sections.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. It's easy to read. It's when I write stuff, there's not a lot of room or any room for interpretation. It's pretty cut and dry, black and white. So.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy too because I really enjoy kind of writing it because I really put my head to thought. Just like
Yes.
if I say it this way, I'm like, ooh, it leaves me open to
Correct.
this interpretation.
Correct.
If I say
and
it this
again,
way, it leaves me open to this interpretation.
Yep. That's where, an experienced realtor versus inexperienced is going to have a little bit better knowledge. Counter offer. So
no one checks that. I'm telling you right
now. I don't think I've ever seen
really
anybody check that. But again, if they do, and then they're going to go back and put their counter, but yeah, they don't have to check it. There used to be a box here that said seller rejects the offer.
They got rid of that.
They got rid of that.
Yeah.
But look at this. Look at this. This is intended to be a legally binding contract. If not fully understood, seek the advice of an attorney prior to signing, not your agent. Your agent is going to go through this contract with you, but if you don't fully understand everything that your agent is explaining to you or you're not comfortable with it, you need to talk to an attorney because they're the only ones that are legally qualified to explain and have help you comprehend exactly what is in this contract. Agents can give you information and guide you through it, but it's like I said, if you don't fully understand, and it's okay to not understand. There's a lot of stuff in this contract. And it's okay to tell your agent, is like, hey, you know what? I really don't understand. Your agent will try to explain, I usually have a couple of different ways to explain certain things, but if you still don't understand, you have to go talk to an attorney. That's the only thing I can say. So, and then also right here, this form has been approved by the Florida Realtors and the Florida Bar. So it's basically been by realtors and lawyers. Lawyers have written it. Realtors have looked it over, and it makes sense for what we do. It's made for real estate, for buying and selling homes, and this is going to be the best contract to use. There's no reason you need to change anything in here. For your basic
in my professional
for your basic stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
because there is no one side leans over the other. Like
Right.
it's not a one-sided contract. That's how these things are written. Like you're buying
Correct.
the house as is, but guess what?
Right.
You have a right to cancel at
Yeah.
sole discretion. I woke up
Correct.
today and God told me that I shouldn't buy this house.
Right.
I've been
That's
told
fine.
that. Many agents have been told that. God said that this wasn't the house for me. I'm like, okay,
Yeah. All right.
you don't need it.
Cool.
That's fine. Sign here.
Right.
Well, you're long as you're within your inspection period. So
Right.
that's it. So
But yeah, this contract is made to benefit both parties and be fair, not just benefits not the right word, but be fair to both parties.
Correct.
It's,
I have to
it's
so yeah. Yeah, that's it. Like,
yeah, I mean,
there to be fair to both parties. If you want a one-sided contract, go to the far bar contract, and that can become quite one-sided.
Correct. The rest of the stuff here is just, yeah, I mean, it's where you sign. You got your broker, your sales broker, and your listing agent and broker information. But man, that's pretty much it. I mean, I know it's boring. I know there's a lot of stuff, but man, it's so important when you're spending, like for this particular offer was $500,000.
Over $100,000 my own money, cash money.
Correct. So
that's a lot of money.
Super, super important to have a really good understanding, to have a really good agent explain these things to you and fill them out correctly and make sure everything is signed and initialed where it needs to be and dated, and you have the proper addendums. Don't have a contract where it says, hey, there's supposed to be a lead paint addendum, and then you don't have a lead paint addendum to accompany it.
Yeah.
I had that the other day with Open Door. I sent a contract over and we were doing an FHA, and the seller wrote back saying, or they sent the contract back, and then I looked at it and I said, well, hey, where's the FHA addendum? We're not fully executed yet. And they sent it to me. I don't know what the deal was, but they didn't send it to me the first time, and then they sent it to me after I asked for it. So
I would
love
to talk to somebody that works for Open Door or OfferPad. I would love to talk to one of them.
Yeah,
and just like be like, why?
Why? They don't, man. God, it was so painful, because if I didn't get to them by like 2:00 on Friday, I didn't talk to them till Monday. They don't work on the weekends. They don't work at all on the weekends. You can send them an email and you'll get a response. Hey, so-and-so is out of the office. They'll get back to you on Monday. I was like, but I need something now. I need it. I need it.
Whereas like a licensed professional is there, we're going to be there at all hours.
Right.
Like, and if you're talking to a licensed professional and their hours of operation is 9 to 5, that is not.
No, I've taken calls at 9:00, 10:00 at night. I'm sure you have too, Chris.
Yeah, plenty of times. Times. And it's just like you're not gonna get anything. Those who get deals done, they do it after hours. They do it on weekends. They do it on the golf course. They do it in the bowling alley. That's how deals get done. Plain and simple. No one, like, ideally, I would love to be in a position to where my whole team and structure is set up to where I can act and do daily business developments from 9 to 5. And on the extreme cases, like, I need to have a conversation. And if I need to have a conversation with someone at like 11:30 o'clock because it's a that type of situation, I'll happily pick the phone at 11 o'clock.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's what we work for, right?
Yeah,
that's 100%. What we work for. Yeah.
And so with that being said, it is what we work for. Jared, chime that music, boy.
Yes, man, it's coming in. But I'm not going to turn it up too loud because I want everybody to still be able to hear us.
Thank you.
But I will keep pushing the volume knob up as we speak.
And AKA, so everyone cheers while we can hear ourselves.
Yes. Exactly.
This
Hey,
guy's
I
gonna
know
get
this.
wild.
I know this was a long episode. Again, we're trying to make these shorter, but we've got a couple of Dram style episodes coming up, and those ones are 20 to 30 minutes. Shoot.
Try to. What's that?
That was a cricket. I accidentally hit another button. My bad. Hey, one day well, that's pretty much. One day we're gonna get this, and it's gonna be perfect. It's gonna be perfect. The sound is gonna be perfect. Everything.
It sounds great right now. Make sure you mark it. Mark a pen, take a highlighter, Sharpie, whatever it is. Put it right there.
I can see exactly where it's at. I'll remember it for next time.
No, you won't.
No, I won't.
Everybody, thank
but
you
yeah,
so much for joining us.
Yes.
Cheers to our friends. Cheers to you,
Cheers.
my friend.
Hey, yes. Likewise. That sounds good. I like it. Cool.